Hey, I'm back. Okay, I just went ahead and uploaded that. I hope it uploads while I'm recording this. We are getting so close to being done, friends. Like, I hope. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to be able to get it done in this next 45 minutes, but I'm going to try. Okay, so now we are down to the subheading. We're still in the cybernetics chapter, but it's on the Frankfurt School. One of the organizations directly linked to the cybernetics group was the Institute for Social Research, or the ISR, but popularly known as the Frankfurt School. For example, Paul Lazarsfeld, the director of the radio project, was one of the invitees to the Macy conferences. Also on hand was Max Horkheimer. What? Also, Aaron Mack BS detector. Sorry, I just went on in for the kill there. We're on part 20. We are starting part 20 now, okay? We're at the header about the Frankfurt School. We're doing Tavistock Institute, Social Engineering the Masses, Fair Use, Commentary, Education, Entertainment, blah, blah, blah. Y'all know by now. Okay. So, for example, okay, now I have to read this name again. Okay. And they're all Eastern European Ashkenaz names. Isn't that interesting? Also on hand was Max Horkheimer, the head of the Frankfurt School, famous for his work in critical theory. Oh, one of our favorite things and one of the biggest brainwashes to hit America literally in decades. Like, critical theory has overtaken all of the institutions 10 years ago. That was all everybody was arguing about. They were applying it to the sexes, they were applying it to the races, they were applying it to the genders, they were literally applying it to everything. Critical theory is there to tear things down. That is the purpose of critical theory. It is a Marxist ideology, and it is created to tear down existing cultural structures or what have you. Okay. Quote, in May 1944, the American Jewish Committee established a Department of Scientific Research, which was headed by Frankfurt School director Max Horkheimer. Well, ain't that some shit? Horkheimer established a project called Studies in Prejudice, with generous funding from the AJC and other agencies, including the Rockefeller Foundations. Is that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution? The AJC. No, I think it's the something American Jewish Committee. I knew they were going to pop up at some point. Quote, the most significant of 5 studies in prejudice produced for the AJC during 1944 through 50 was the authoritarian personality. Authors Adorno, Elsie Frankel Brunswick, Levinson, and Sanford assembled a large research team from the Berkeley Public Opinion Study and the International Institute of Social Research to conduct thousands of interviews of Americans to profile their allegedly deep-seated tendencies toward authoritarianism, prejudice, and anti-Semitism. Yeah, we got to start stirring the shit up early so we can, have a reason to behead these people in 40 or 50 years. That's what's coming. Noahide laws. I'm telling y'all, bro, this shit has they're gonna try it. They're gonna fucking try it. It's already on paper. The ink has dried. Quote, the most significant of the 5 studies in okay, I already read that shit. I think. Yeah, okay. Okay, Dr. William Morrow, the leading protege of Dr. Kurt Lewin, who is one key bridge figure between the Frankfurt School and the Tavistock Institute, was a research director for the Authoritarian Personality Project. End quote. The authors of the Authoritarian Personality let it all hang out in the concluding chapter of the book, in which they summarized their findings and spelled out their recipe for social transformation. Great. Can't wait to read it. Quote, it seems obvious that the modification of the potentially fascist structure cannot be achieved by psychological means alone. The task is comparable to that of eliminating neurosis or delinquency or nationalism from the world. These are products of the total organization of society and are to be changed only as that society has changed. It is not for the psychologist to say how such changes are to be brought about. The problem is one which requires the efforts of all social scientists. All that we would insist upon is that in the councils or roundtables where the problem is considered an action plan, the psychologist should have a voice. We believe that the scientific understanding of society must include an understanding of what it does to people, and that it is possible to have social reforms, even broad and sweeping ones, which, though desirable in their own right, would not necessarily change the structure of the prejudiced personality. See, they want control, ultimately, because they have created this false science with all their mental hoodoo voodoo quackery talk, their brain shrinking talk, and they want to be able to 1013 you or 5150 you and like throw you in there, zap your brain, like numb you out a little bit, so you can't spout your ideas and your opinions and be an autonomous, intelligent, creative being. No, that's not what they want. That's not what they want. But these psychologists, they want all the control, bro, to make the decisions about what happens once we are forcefully locked behind a wall or a door or something. Okay. Let's see. For the fascist potential to change or even to be held in check, there must be an increase in people's capacity to see themselves and to be themselves. This cannot be achieved by the manipulation of people, however well grounded in modern psychology the devices of manipulation might be. It is here that psychology may play its most important role. Techniques for overcoming resistance, developed mainly in the field of individual psychotherapy, can be improved and adapted for use with groups and even for use on a mass scale. End quote. The authors conclude with this most revealing proposition. Quote, we need not suppose that appeal to emotion belongs to those who strive in the direction of fascism, while democratic propaganda must limit itself to reason and restraint. If fear and destructiveness are the major emotional sources of fascism, Eros belongs mainly to democracy. End quote. All right, and then now we're to the next header, still in the same cybernetics chapter, called the Cybernetic Group. The Frankfurt School and their closest allies at Tavistock, quote, were the architects of both the Cybernetics Project and the Counterculture Project of the 1960s. In fact, the Cybernetics Group, sponsored by the Josiah Macy Foundation, was the umbrella under which the CIA and British intelligence conducted their mass experimentation with mind-altering psychedelic drugs, including LSD-25, which experiment was eventually spilled out into the streets of San Francisco, New York's Greenwich Village, and every American college campus, giving us the counterculture paradigm shift of 1966 through 72. End quote. In 1965, one of the four directors of the Authoritarian Personality Project, R. Nevitz Sanford, wrote The Forward to Utopiates, the Use and Users of LSD-25, which was published by Tavistock Publications. I will come back to this later in the report. If you are to believe the official gloss, since 1930, the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation has devoted itself to the promotion of health and the relief of suffering. And then it gives their website. And then /history. So it's like josiahmacyfoundation.org /about/history, directing its support toward medical education and establishing programs supporting conferences and publications on these and related topics. Sounds like harmless enough, doesn't it? Oh, but nay, my friend. The historian Jean-Pierre Dupuy describes the Macy Foundation's role in the cybernetics group this way. Quote, cybernetics was obliged from the beginning to ally itself with a movement, a political lobby, actually operating under the auspices of the Macy Foundation, that sought to assure world peace and universal mental health by means of a bizarre cocktail concocted from the psychoanalysis, cultural anthropology, advanced physics, and the new thinking associated with the cybernetics group. End quote. Corporate media propaganda subsequently brainwashed the masses to believe that Macy Foundation and figures such as Lazarsfeld and Weiner, Bateson, Mead, and Ashby were merely participants in social experiments to improve the quality of life through the hodgepodge merging of technology, evolution, and various social sciences. In reality, these individuals were lackeys for the foundations of the oligarch world empire, Rockefeller, Josiah Macy, Russell Sage, and others. Less well known to the general public is that the Macy Foundation has done more to harm America's social reality than any other single institution. The Macy Foundation. Interesting. We'll have to look that up later. Quote, during and immediately after World War II, the Macy Foundation was utilized by a combination which included the British Secret Services, corrupt sections of American intelligence, plus treasonous members of the U.S. establishment to conduct a vast social experiment. The overall purpose of the experiment was to end the uncontrolled optimism of a population that had just won a world war and started to rebuild the world, and instead to redirect that energy inward upon itself. Quote, 3 parts of that experiment became so successful that most people today think of them as some natural evolution of Western society rather than as an unnatural deformation imposed from the outside. The sexual revolution of the late 1960s and early 1970s, which decisively accelerated today's collapse of the nuclear family, could not have occurred in the form in which it did without the Macy Foundation's almost single-handed sponsorship of the development and dissemination of oral contraceptives through the work of Harvard's Dr. Gregory Pincus. He sounds like he had... Never mind. Pincus was studying reproduction, and the eugenicists at Macy were studying how certain types of people should not be allowed to engage in reproduction. How lovely. In 1954, Macy awarded Pincus a large special grant. In 1955, Pincus patented the pill. Quote, similarly, the Macy Foundation was a primary actor in the... God, there's something like itchy. I don't know if it's fuzz. I don't know what it is. That's like driving me nuts. Okay. Sorry, guys. Now I totally lost my freaking place. Okay. Hodgepodge of emerging technology, evolution, and various social sciences. In reality, these individuals were lackeys for the foundations of the oligarch world empire, Rockefeller, Josiah Macy, Russell Sage, and others. I feel like I already read that, bro. Oh, yeah. Okay, I did. Okay, so we're down here at the patented pill. Quote, similarly, the Macy Foundation was primary actor in creating the, quote, psychedelic revolution, thereby turning a post-war population that hitherto looked at sleeping pills with suspicion in today's America, which routinely takes a new drug for every new mood and prescribes psychoactive substances to its children by the millions of doses. And that's facts. And perhaps most importantly, it was the Macy Foundation that helped to pervert American citizens' world-renowned sense of technological optimism into the now pervasive ideology of the information age. Quote, the Macy Foundation and MK Ultra. The bizarre Macy cocktail blend of the late 1940s and early 1950s became one of the primary covert funding conduits for the CIA through Macy Foundation director Frank Fremont Smith. Fremont Smith was very close to Dr. Harold Abramson. The CIA-linked psychiatrist and associated professionally with both Columbia University and Mount Sinai Hospital, whose LSD work had Macy Foundation cover. One such individual was Dr. Louis Jolly West, then chair of UCLA's Department of Psychiatry and director of the Neuropsychiatric Institute. West was most famous as a CIA contract psychiatrist whose work on the MK Ultra program in the 1950s involved feeding LSD to elephants. What the fuck? Elephants, bro? That's like abusive. That's shitty. Poor elephants. Aside from Dr. Abramson, a significant number of the Macy Foundation conference members, such as Gregory Bateson, Margaret Mead, and the psychologist Kurt Lewin, worked closely with the U.S. government during the Cold War under covert MK Ultra drug brainwashing experiments on the one hand, and psychedelic drugs as a means of social manipulation on the other. Another key participant in the Macy conferences was Donald Marquis, then a University of Michigan psychologist. Quote, Marquis helped organize basic research on the psychology of propaganda, on the nature of various national targets, and on various social groups within nations through MIT's Center for Group Dynamics. End quote. It would inspire MIT's Group Networks Laboratory to study small group dynamics under the supervision of Alexis Bavelis, one of the top-level advisor on Cold War secret operations for the Office of Naval Research, contracted out of MIT. This same MIT group later worked with the CIA to produce a major study of communist Chinese coercive persuasion techniques, more popularly known as brainwashing. They're all the evil shitlords. They're just all in there. The Jays, the communist Chinese, everybody. Gotta wet my whistle. Excuse me. All right, where were we? Other Macy studies, such as a sponsored study in cell biology, were actually analyzing techniques in eugenics or race science. Large amounts of grant money also went to what the foundation called psychosomatic interrelations. That is, quote, how psychological change affects the mind and vice versa. This was a cover for work I'm sorry, not or, that's a little mess up on the typeset. This was a cover work, I'm sorry, this was a cover for work on clinical techniques that would later be called brainwashing. Quote, the Macy Foundation also provided financing and publicity for the British social engineer Dr. William Sargent, whose 1957 book Battle for the Mind provided a how-to-do-it manual for mass brainwashing. How quaint. Sargent, a specialist in shock trauma, spent 20 years in the United States working on the MK Ultra project and other secret mind control efforts of the U.S. and British governments, end quote. A new header, eugenics, which that's being done to us right now too. I don't know if you noticed, but the quality of our food's going down, down, down. The quality of medical care is going down, down, down. The quality of water, the quality of everything is going down, 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 like Rock Lobster. Anyways, throughout history, there have been those who, with an eye to specific political objectives, have used terror or the threat of terror against targeted populations. The scientific rationale for tyranny has always been attractive to the elites because it creates a convenient excuse to treat their fellow men as lower than animals. Eugenics, a crackpot notion of hereditary superiority and inferiority, originated in the 1880s and 1890s, spawned by a British network of families including Darwin's cousin, Sir Francis Galton, Thomas Huxley, Sir Arthur Balfour, the Cadbury and the Wedgwood families, as well as other late 19th century British Empire strategists linked to the Round Table movement of Cecil Rhodes and Lord Alfred Milner. They saw an opportunity to advance mankind toward a new dark age by taking the reins of Darwin's perversely racialist survival of the fittest natural selection evolution theory and applied social principles to develop social Darwinism. In the United States, this crackpot notion is only killed unalived. Who knows how many people? I mean, just think about Planned Parenthood and all the people they unalive every single day. Babies are people too, bro. I don't want to hear none of that shit. Think about all those potential lives and then just all the other ones that, get early onset, all kind of terminal illnesses because of their medical treatments and the food we eat and the air we breathe and the water we drink. I mean, it's like freaking everywhere, bro. Anyways, in the United States, the story of eugenics begins in 1904 when the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory was started by prominent eugenicist Charles Davenport with the funding of leading American would-be oligarchs, the Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Harriman. Also, Bill Gates' grandmother was involved with this shit too. By 1910, the British had created the first network of social workers expressly to serve as spies and enforcers of the eugenics race cult that was rapidly taking control of Western society. The Austrian painters, English financial backers weren't the only ones sponsoring the eugenics research. In the 1920s, the Rockefeller family bankrolled the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Genealogy and demography, which later would form a central pillar in the Third Reich. And it is racial, and it's mostly aimed at black people. I mean, think about it. Are all the Planned Parenthoods at? They're all in the inner cities. They have brainwashed black people into offing themselves. I mean, and white people do it too, probably at, a pretty high rate, but like, I feel like black people are targeted with this shit. So yeah, it's racially motivated by Nazis. Okay. So at the end of the war, with corpses still smoking across Europe, the Allies protected from prosecution the very Nazi scientists, such as Joseph Mengele, who had tortured thousands of people to unaliving. The Nazi radical brand of eugenics had embarrassed the Anglo-American social controllers, making eugenics and mental hygiene dirty words. The controllers, however, wouldn't be deterred. Quote, in 1956, the British Eugenics Society decided in a resolution that the society would pursue eugenics by less obvious means. This means, quote, Planned Parenthood and the environmentalist movement. Now, why would an anti-human movement such as eugenics employ something called the environmentalist movement? Why would they do that? Because they're trying to brainwash us all into believing that we are not important as the land around us, and also that we're running out of land. They've got this scarcity mindset. None of it's true. There's more than enough person in the entire world to probably have 5 acres to himself. Probably more. I mean, let's be so for real. But, they want to brainwash us and like batter us down and, gaslight us and tell us that we are polluting the environment when it's not us, it's them. They're the ones with the jets and the industrialism and all this crap, and they're blaming cow farts and our car exhausts for their chemtrailing and poisoning of the waters and the soil and all this crap. So, like, don't believe their hype. Okay. Every population control policy was simply renamed as they continued their work under the protection of the United Nations and its associate organizations. The Eugenics, Euthanasia, and Mental Hygiene Societies of Britain. Mental fucking hygiene? I am so sorry. Mental hygiene. That's, very apropos to go along with the term brainwashing. Just unbelievable, bro. Okay. Okay. America and the rest of Europe was simply renamed the more palatable Mental Health Association of Great Britain and National Association of Mental Health of the United States, which later became the World Federation of Mental Health. I will come back to them later in this section. Eugenics Quarterly magazine became Social Biology, and the American Birth Control League became Planned Parenthood. You see how we've changed the names of words? Like, do you remember George Carlin's stand-up routine where he talks about what is happening with our language and how, we've softened it to make it sound less heinous? Go look that up, dude. It's a really good, it's like a funny because it's true stand-up bit that George Carlin did. Just the renaming of things into something that just doesn't sound quite as evil, Okay. It is not widely known that some of the largest aid agencies and U.S. Christian fundamentalist groups have been covertly running in Africa over the past several decades. Its banner is family planning, which is turned on its head when one understands the real implications and far-reaching objectives. These family planning policies are vigorously and consistently advocated by major bilateral donors such as the U.S. government through its surrogate USAID or USAID, which wasn't that just in the news? Wasn't it just defunded? Hopefully. And multilateral agencies, most notably the International Planned Parenthood Federation, the UN Fund for Population Activities, more like for population control or population. Y'all, I swear, I feel like I have a dog hair or a cat hair or something on my. It is driving me insane. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Driving me crazy. Anyways, the UN Fund for Population Activities, like population activities, that's wild to name it that. And the World Bank in Africa, like population activities. The World Bank, since the 1960s, has been the leading funding entity of population control, with annual spending skyrocketing from a paltry $27 million in 1969 and 1970 to over $4.5 billion by 2006. World Bank presidents Eugene Black and Robert McNamara were at one time trustees of Rockefeller-controlled Ford Foundation. Quote, more significantly, population control policies have now become a key condition required for the disbursement of structural adjustment loans, or SALs, by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund within the framework of their structural adjustment programs, or SAPs. SAP conditions typically include, in addition to devaluation, liberalization, and privatization of the national economies and of the health and education sectors, population control policies. Thus, preparation of a population policy statement is a typical condition for the disbursement of an SAP. Betsy Hartman, and that's with two N's, so you know what kind of name that is, Director of Population and Development Program at Hampshire College, coined a new term for such policies, Malthusian eco-fascism. She notes that the international aid community currently concentrates its population control efforts in sub-Saharan Africa, and mainly planning becomes the number one priority. Quote, the overriding imperative of these internationally generated programs is to reduce population growth as fast and as cost effectively as possible, end quote. Which, don't you remember Bill Gates in his TED Talk? This is exactly the same shit he was talking about. As she rightly observes, in much of Africa where AIDS threatens tragic human and demographic consequences, the present emphasis on population control and defunding of health systems amount to indirect triage, end quote. Like, I don't even know what to say to that whole paragraph. Like, the deconstructing that I'd have to do, like, that, but that's bullshit. I'm just going to say, like, one day, you guys, I'm going to have a studio, and I'm going to have a light, and it's going to say bullshit on it, okay? And when I detect it, I'm going to mash the button, and the bullshit light's going to go off. That's the whole idea for this channel. But I'm sitting here in front of this bookshelf of perfumes and books and stuff, which more on the perfumes thing in a minute. Let me finish reading this. Needless to say, Africa is not the only continent where these brutal policies are enacted. No, they're doing it to all of us. In 1972, in an effort to deal with the so-called population emergency in India, the World Bank funded a $21 million project in which resulted in millions of involuntary sterilizations and thousands of deaths. And that was Bill Gates. That was Bill Gates's philanthropic, whatever the fuck he was doing. He was vaccinating women, I'm pretty sure, and sterilizing them. And there was a huge lawsuit about it. And this is Googleable, okay? I'm not making this shit up. The confluence of eugenicists, Nazi environmentalists, and one world company enthusiasts also converge through a secretive 1001 club comprised of the most ancient and powerful families of Europe who finance covert Malthusian operations of the WWF in Africa. One such operation run by the WWF, for example, was called Operation Lock, ostensibly to save the black rhino in South Africa. Quote, John Hanks, WWF's director, financed a term of retired British SAS commandos to infiltrate and sabotage so-called poaching rings through an outside paramilitary force, instigating black-on-black violence between the African National Congress and Inkatha Freedom Party by carrying out targeted acts of violence like the June 18th, 1992 Boy Patong massacre. End quote. The massacre caused the African National Congress to walk out of the initial formal negotiations to end apartheid, accusing the ruling National Party of complicity in the attacks. The goal was to trigger a bloody civil war and prevent the end of the apartheid system and the reintegration of South Africa into the world community, end quote. WWF and its direct action terrorist arm, Greenpeace, as well as like-minded groups, are not just some lunatic fringe that can easily be ignored. They are the shock troops of the oligarchy in their fight against humanity. Quote, Malthusian law, similar to what was proposed for the UN 1994 Cairo Population Conference, is a theory in demography regarding population growth developed during the Industrial Revolution on the basis of the writings of Thomas Malthus from 1798 on population, which was nothing more than a plagiarized version of the Venetian monk Gianmaria Ortez's 1790 publication Riflessioni sulla popolazione delle nazioni. According to his theory, population expands faster than food supplies. Ortez is the intellectual author upon which the genocidal 1994 UN Cairo Population Conference draft was based. Most people may find all of this mind-boggling at the very least, but the cultural heroes from the bygone era, such as Margaret Mead, Huxley Brothers, and the late Carl Jung, chief promoter of the collective racial unconscious, has not only attended conferences year after year with the Nazi doctor responsible for some of the most heinous crimes against the human race, but wholeheartedly supported every, quote, theory which brought on the Nazi Holocaust against humanity. For example, Jung was an editor in pre-war years of German Journal of Psychotherapy with Dr. M. H. Göring, Hermann Göring's cousin, and a participant in a, quote, T4 euthanasia project. How nice. The elimination of 400,000 mental patients in German institutions. They're doing that shit in Canada right now, bro. They're letting people just unalive themselves. People, and at first they had to have like a terminal diagnosis, but now it's just like, oh, you're a little depressed. Why don't you take a dirt nap? You know, it's like, what the fuck? It's depraved, bro. Okay, so now we are on the subsection called World Federation of Mental Health. Still under the chapter called Cybernetics. World Federation of Mental Health is a perfect example of this confluence of Rockefeller, CIA, Tavistock apparatus. Reese, anthropologist, Margaret Reed, behavioral scientist, Lawrence K. Frank, Josiah Macy, executive Fremont Smith, and German sociologist Max Horkheimer were all in Paris together in the summer of 1948 to launch the WFMH, and probably to a little bit celebrate their schmeinest country being like allowed to like become a thing, you know, like they're gonna finally have their own their own country from which to plot on the rest of us, goy, you know. Quote, although he had died the previous year, Kurt Lewin had been involved in the preparations for launching the Federation through his involvement under Frank in the National Committee for Mental Hygiene and the London-centered International Committee for Mental Hygiene, with a half a dozen cybernetics group members on its board. Both bodies oversaw a network of over 4,000 psychiatric shock troops, in Reese's words, who would be at the heart of a worldwide social engineering apparatus penetrated into every community. And those are the fake activists that you see now that the late Andrew Breitbart so eloquently called out. He would show up to where they were at because he already knew their game, and he would like get out there with a fucking megaphone and holler at them and be like, you're getting paid by the hour to do this. Because what they do is they pay people on like Craigslist or any of those, you know, like gig job sites to go and be a protester for a day or do some kind of social something for the day. And when you're literally just paid to stand there and hold a sign and yell slogans. And they put you on a tour bus and they take you to a site and they have the local news come up, and it all looks very legitimate and very real, but it's not. It's a brainwash to get you to take action against your better interests. I'm just saying. Okay, so Margaret Mead and Lawrence K. Frank, two pillars of the cybernetics group, authored the founding statement of Reese's World Federation of Mental Health. Both Mead and Fremont Smith would later succeed Reese as president, which they titled, quote, Manifesto of the First International, Mead and Fremont Smith bluntly wrote, "The goal of mental health has been enlarged from the concern for the development of healthy personalities to the larger task of creating a healthy society. The concept of mental health is coextensive with world order and world community," end quote. So get in line, take your meds, shut the fuck up. There are three dominant features to WFMH's manifesto. Firstly, Rees stressed the need to apply World War I and World War II military psychiatric experience as a paradigm, quote, for a system of community mental health clinics through which counterinsurgency psychiatrists could forcibly administer, end quote, therapy to large population groups. Another key point in the manifesto stressed the need of placing psychiatrists in key positions, which would allow them to play determinant roles in administrative and social programs of government and industry. As investor L. Marcos wrote back in 1974, quote, "One should not be astonished that the late George Orwell conceived his 1984 novel after a period of exposure to a group of Rees's followers," end quote. See there? And that's probably why I can see this crap, because my parents had the book and I read it. And once you're made aware of something, you can't unsee what you've seen. So I just naturally see this crap. And I want everyone else to see it too, because what they're trying to do to us is beyond evil, bro. It's beyond evil. Launched by the Cybernetics Group in 1948, the World Federation of Mental Health, or WFMH, was amongst the nastiest projects launched by the world's leading sociologists, psychiatrists, and anthropologists, the so-called psychiatric shock troops, whose first president, Brigadier General John Rawlings Rees, was the director of the Tavistock Institute, Britain's premier psychological warfare center. Carl Jung was elected vice president. Another individual closely associated with WFMH was the Nazi doctor Werner Bellinger, who sat on the White House Conference on Children and Youth in the United States in the 1950s. For as much as Jung's supporters would like to deny it, there is no bending the facts. Jung was not confused about whom he was backing, the Austrian painter and the Nazis. Meanwhile, immediately after the war, Sir Julian Huxley changed the name of their program for enforced birth control, zero economic growth, and the technology of mass mind control, and continued to apply the principles which created Nazi Germany's mass unaliving against the, quote, racially unfit, end quote. 1946, Huxley announced that, quote, "Even though it is quite true that any radical eugenic policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the eugenic problem is examined with the greatest care and that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake so that much that now is unthinkable may at least become thinkable," end quote. In 1974, Henry Kissinger, Huxley's intellectually sodomized son, said, quote, "Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy towards the third world," end quote. And now it's the highest priority against us, the first world. So when we're rapidly becoming the third world, they're going to make everybody the third world and then depopulate all of us. That is their goal. I mean, I shit you not, bro. That's the plan. Huxley was a founder of the British Eugenics Society, first Director General of UNESCO, which pushed for population reduction and what Huxley called a single culture for the world. He was also a leading member of the WFMH, Director of the Abortion Law Reform Association, and founder of the World Wildlife Fund, whose first president was the former card-carrying Nazi Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, and one of the organizers of the Bilderberg meeting since its inception in 1954. How nice. Few realized that Huxley represented a social set of miscreants, the likes of which have not been seen since. Amongst them was his grandfather, Thomas Huxley, whose outspoken support of Charles Darwin's degenerate theory of evolution earned him the nickname Darwin's Bulldog. His personal mentor and Satanist, Aleister Crowley, the aforementioned Brigadier John Rawlings Rees, Bertrand Russell, and H.G. Wells, whose open conspiracy was a call for fascist imperial world dictatorship. Quote, "What makes the open conspiracy open is not the laying out of some secret master plan, not the revealing of the membership roster of some inner sanctum of the rich and powerful, but rather the understanding that ideas, philosophy, and culture control history," end quote. Also involved Julian's brother Aldous of the Brave New World fame. In Aldous Huxley's book, the population is genetically divided into alphas, betas, all the way down to the synthetically produced epsilon morons through the application of eugenics or Nazi breeding laws. Over the years, the WFMH itself became a huge clearinghouse of psychological warfare profiles used by British and American intelligence services during the Cold War. A typical Macy WFMH joint project was the Conference on Problems of Health and Human Relations in Germany, a series of high-level 1950 to 1951 meetings designed to convince German social scientists and healthcare providers that the Frankfurt School's bogus authoritarian personality profiles should be relied upon in dealing with German patients, end quote. You see, this is commie J. Schminus stuff. New terms like the transhumanism, population control, sustainability, conservation, bioethics, and environmentalism replaced the now outdated racial hygiene and social Darwinism, and in the process, quote, prepared public opinion, medical education, remember that, and government policy to discard the notion of the sanctity of human life. And that is basically what they've done. They have dehumanized the fuck out of us. Do you know that there is a patent that was in these mRNA shots for the corona apocalypse that are patented, and that if you have that inside of you, you are now owned by them because you're considered a product and no longer a human. You're considered a transhuman, and now you have no human rights. See the implications of this? All this AI implant, all this shit. It all goes back to like patent law, legalese, the law of the sea, all this shit, okay? It's one big snake eating its tail. Except that as investigative journalist Rob Ainsworth explains, quote, environmentalist movement is anything but the grassroots movement it pretends to be. Yeah, it does shit. The biggest and most influential group receives tens of millions of dollars in funding every year, and the boards of trustees and directors reflect this, end quote. From Survival International to United Nations Environment Program, from World Watch Institute to International Food Policy Research Institute, from World Resources Institute to Greenpeace, the Nature Conservancy and Swiss-based International Union for the Conservation of Nature, from the UN Development Program to the Natural Resources Defense Council and Environmental Defense. They're all run by bankers, hedge fund managers, and big oil, aka Schminus J's. As Club of Rome wrote in its 1991 publication, The First Global Revolution, quote, the real enemy is humanity itself, end quote. And with that, we are going to stop because we're getting close to 45 minutes. And next on our little reading is going to be about the transhumanist agenda, which if you're not aware of that by now, why not? It's pervasive. It's everywhere. Nicholson, 1968. He has a great channel where he covers the transhumanist agenda and everything that the evil shitlords are trying to put upon us. Anyways, I love you guys. Thank you to y'all that like sit here and actually listen to me read. I'm just trying to literally share information and like document it as well. You know what I'm saying? Like just to have it out there. Because I'm sure you can go on the Wayback Machine or whatever and find books, but I don't know. I feel like they're starting to take stuff down. And with that Joe Kells guy or whatever his name was, all he did was uploaded some old Bibles, I think, and like a few other books about like free energy or something onto a website so people could read it for free. And he's unalived now. So I have had people tell me to be careful, but I'm being careful. And I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and that's sharing information. And you know, work is not the proper place to do it. Nowhere else can I do this. And but I just feel like an urgency to share like what I see and what is like going on in society, and you know, just share that Jesus can literally fix all that. I mean, it may not end pretty here, but it will be pretty eventually. Jesus can like totally fix everything. He's the best. Anyways, I love you guys, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Deuces!